Hello, my name is Luke Anderson, and I'll be sharing my presentation over what is wrong with me, an autoethnographic exploration of teacher stressors and burnout. If you'd like to follow along with the slides, there's a QR code that will allow you to scan and see the slideshow, as well as a link to the published version of this article. I want to begin with a reading from a journal entry from October of 2022. What is wrong with me? I love teaching, but how do I know if I'm burned out or overly stressed? The more I read about burnout, the more I think I might be experiencing it to some degree. I still want to be at school with my students. I still love lesson planning. I still enjoy teaching literature, but I can't deny that I'm feeling unusually stressed, tired, and heavy, for lack of a better word. Is that burnout? If so, how do I fix it? Or what does this mean for my career? Ironically, all these questions are not helping with my stress level. My journey with autoethnography started in the fall of 2020 when I was taking a doctoral level course about the method. We were asked to consistently journal for 3 months, during which time I was a secondary English teacher at a local high school. This ended up being the most intense semester of my 9+ year career in secondary education. And when I was analyzing the journals, it yielded a clear theme for me to explore, which was teacher stressors. I coupled this with analysis with existing research on the topic, which also led me to exploring burnout symptoms and what those meant based on my journal entries. And so I want to share with you some of the different aspects of teacher stressors that I was experiencing myself. I will start with a journal entry and then talk about some of the research that speaks to those. Stressor number one was school violence threats and lockdowns. So this is from September of 2020. We had our first ever hard lockdown that wasn't a drill yesterday. I could tell immediately by the tone of the administrative assistant's voice when she said we were in a hard lockdown that it was serious. Surprisingly, I felt calm but alert, listening carefully to see if anything had happened outside. Overall, the event lasted about an hour and a half, which feels like an eternity when you're sitting in silence waiting for something to happen. Students had a wide range of reactions, with some being very energized, some seeming stressed, others acting like it was no big deal. Some of them didn't get to eat because it happened right in the middle of lunch. My kids all had stories about what had happened and what they had heard, so I gave them time to just talk and process. They said that other students near them were crying or acting like it was a party. I wonder how many students were actually significantly impacted by this. Anxiety is already an epidemic in our schools, and I have many students that have stress passes to see counselors when they're overwhelmed, many who are medicated due to anxiety, and many who talk about anxiety, and so this certainly is not going to help. It will also ratchet up the level of teacher anxiety in the building for sure. Increasing threats of school violence and the increasing number of lockdowns are really difficult for teachers to navigate. Farmer wrote that when situations arise where students are put in direct danger, teachers are in the forefront of ensuring their safety, which is a lot of stress on their shoulders. Additionally, the ways in which teachers cope with experiences of violence may significantly impact their intent to stay in the teaching profession, how well they teach in classrooms, and also their own psychological well being. And so this is a really big contributor to teacher stressors in the current classroom. The next stressor that I want to discuss is students with life threatening illnesses. My student with a life threatening illness tried coming to school again today because the hospital teacher is forcing his family to bring him, or he will earn unexcused absences and possibly up for truancy. It is so unfair and frustrating that I can't do anything about those types of decisions. He was so stressed out by everything that he broke down crying and is spending all day with his case manager instead of going to classes anyway. I feel so badly for him. He is very overwhelmed by what is happening to him in his life, and then he feels behind and overwhelmed when he looks at his grades. On top of all that, a kid in class came to school knowing she had bronchitis, and he sits near her when he's in my class, so that could have been disastrous and possibly life threatening to him if he was in my room today. It's very stressful to have that kind of pressure, literally of life and death situations, on top of all the other regular stressors fall on me. This was my first year having a student that had a life-threatening illness that was battling things and going through treatments. And Spinelli talked about this, that along with the personal worry that you feel just empathetically for these students, there are heightened expectations that students with cancer or other life-threatening illnesses put on teachers, such as tracking their physical condition to modify expectations and assignments based on their constantly changing health status. This is a lot of extra work and also a lot of extra emotional work. The next stressor is struggling student learners. This is from August of 2022. This morning's inclusion class was a kind of disaster with the essay. I provided my exceptional education co-teacher with multiple tools to use, like sentence stem sheets and her talking through how to help kids find evidence, but she said she never had to teach writing to inclusion kids before. We split the students and she insisted on taking the exceptional ed kids, even though I offered to take them since they outnumbered the general education kids in that period. This class is mostly composed of exceptional education, multilingual learners, and deaf or hard of hearing students, which makes that class so tough to teach. We have multiple kids who can't even read on a third or fourth grade level. I had a student who couldn't read the word set or spell the word uses in my class this week, and I'm a high school teacher, and I'm supposed to get them to write essays over Edgar Allan Poe. As you can see from the short excerpt, teaching inclusion classes is extremely difficult and is really challenging for students to meet all the different needs. Weiss et al. Found that teachers considered adapting curriculum for numerous required student supports and inclusion classes to be a significant and stressful burden. To meet the needs of students that are at various grade levels within one class is extremely challenging and took a lot of my time as an educator. Number 4 is trauma victims as students. I'm not going to read the excerpt from this, but it's found in the article that is linked. But you are privy as a teacher to a lot of information about your students. And unfortunately, many teachers aren't really sure about their role, how to best support students, or whether they're too emotionally involved or not emotionally involved enough. And a side effect of this can be teachers experiencing vicarious or secondary trauma symptoms, actually knowing about things. Every year we have to go through sex trafficking training, we have to go through abuse training because we're mandatory reporters. And the stress of having to have that extra burden on top of all the educational requirements that we have is a lot. The next one is high stakes testing. Again, I'm not going to read this one. You can read the excerpt from this found in the article. But as we know, many teachers have to not only do state required testing, but also district required testing regularly with their students. And many research have linked test-based accountability measures with increased stress or higher teacher attrition rates. So it's actually driving teachers out of the profession. Finally, and again, the journal entry for this is found in the article, the impact of COVID-19 we are still feeling, but it was especially acute when I was writing. And according to Hyder, both students and teachers experience lasting isolation, burnout, and a lost sense of belonging from this time. This is dissipating a bit as time goes on, but the lost learning and the difficulties teachers feel of getting students caught up is still impacting classrooms even today. And Gallup polling showed that teacher burnout rates doubled in the years right after the pandemic. So, speaking of burnout, there were certain symptoms of burnout that when they did further research, I was experiencing myself based on all of these stressors that I just mentioned. Things such as physical and mental fatigue, secondary trauma and compassion fatigue, where I was experiencing some of the same symptoms that my students were emotionally, and then taking work home. I had a really difficult time leaving work at school, especially when my student was battling a life-threatening illness or when we had a gun threat at our school. It was really hard for me to just leave that at school and then come home and not carry that with me. I was having stress dreams about these things, and the cumulative effect meant that I was experiencing a lot of burnout symptoms during this semester. And so then I also researched some things that might be able to help. Here are some of the recommendations that I found or that I just knew of personally from my own teaching practice. First of all, disrupting the burnout narrative amongst teachers where they don't continually talk about how burnout they feel. This also can really impact new teachers in the field or student teachers when they're hearing this all the time and make them not want to be part of it. Ensuring a supportive school culture and administration is really important so that you have a place to go where you feel safe to talk about what you're experiencing. Adjusting teacher workloads to levels that aren't overburdening. More training and support with handling student trauma is really helpful. Mindfulness interventions such as meditation or yoga can be really helpful for teachers with putting some of the stress aside. Preventative education about stressors and burnout is really helpful, having more professional development. Um, and we need more research on the impact of stress on teachers and what is happening. This is just a small step in showing what teachers go through just in one semester. I am just a snapshot of this, but many teachers are facing a lot of stressors and burnout. And we need more research about this to find out what are the cumulative effects of this, what are ways that we can overcome this. But this was just one study in using autoethnography to be able to accomplish that. So thank you for listening today.